Hey everyone, I'm Mike. I'm an aspiring professional artist and welcome to my channel. So in today's video I'm going to be talking about how to create a mannequin and how you can go about getting from a mannequin to drawing stuff from imagination. Alright, let's get started. So why do I think that mannequins are important for imaginative drawing? So mannequins do a lot of things, but first and foremost, they make it so that you have a solid foundation in which you can draw off of. So, for instance, if you're trying to draw a really hard pose, but you don't have a simplistic way to break down the body parts, then you're kind of stuck just trying to draw shapes that you're seeing, or if you're doing imaginative drawing, then you're stuck with trying to imagine shapes and things in different perspectives that you don't really understand. It makes it almost impossible to get a lifelike creation out of it. So having a mannequin that works for you is extraordinarily important for this. It's going to allow you the space to create things that are going to be more lifelike than what you would do if you weren't using a mannequin, for instance. So mannequins don't all look the same, and there's a reason for that. Everybody's mannequin is going to be catered to what their stylistic choices are, and what they themselves see and break down as they are actually drawing from life when they're practicing and learning. So one of the things you're getting ready to see me do is I'm going to break down the shapes that I use. So as you can see, I use a cylinder for the arm, like a sphere for the elbow, another cylinder for the lower arm, and I use this like almost mouse, like computer mouse shape for the palm of the hand, and this like little flapper for the fingers, and kind of just this little, I guess, elongated cone kind of shape for the thumb. For the rib cage, I like to use this egg shape that has the split for the sternum in it. Then the stomach part, I just kind of use a sphere. The hips, I'm starting to move towards using this like almost pyramid type shape. I'm working on solidifying that as I go. And then the legs, I use these like almost drumstick shapes for the upper leg. The knee is a sphere, and the lower leg is another cylinder. And then the feet, I have this kind of like paddle shape in mind for the feet. And then finally the head is kind of this sphere shape with just I don't know what to call that, it's almost like a wedge at the bottom. And the neck is also just a quick cylinder, and I also try to put in the collarbone. So once you have all this down, what you need to be doing is you need to be taking that mannequin and using it within your gesture drawings. So for instance, last week you saw me working on opposing curves theory, and in that video I did a whole bunch of gesture drawings. At this point I'm doing these gestures almost every single day. And I'm really working on solidifying my mannequin. I'm working on making sure that I can use this mannequin in almost every pose. And if I get confused, what I do is I typically will revert back to a more simplistic version of my mannequin in order to help me get the shapes in a better way. And that's okay, right? I think that a lot of people make this mistake that once you have this mannequin, that you're supposed to just not worry about it anymore, and that's it. Like, you don't improve upon your mannequin anymore, or you don't you don't change your mannequin as you explore new anatomy or learn new things about anatomy, and that's just not true. You need to take the time to really work on actually improving your mannequin. You should have something that's a little bit more anatomically correct as you progress within your work. So for instance, probably the next change that I personally would like to make is I want to be able to consistently do that hip and pelvic region shape that I showed you earlier in every single one of my drawings, even though I'm doing them pretty fast. The other change that I'm probably going to be making pretty soon is I want to get to a point in which I am doing a more wedged like shape for the deltoid, and I also want to start doing you know how you see action figures, how the like the action figures have these like slits almost where the joints connect. I would like to be able to do that with my arms. So for instance, your bicep kind of slips into your lower arm, and your two forearm muscles there are three, but the two major forearm muscle groups, the anterior and posterior groups, they kind of wrap around that, and that's something that I'm going to start to work on in the near future. So just small things like that. You want to consistently be tinkering with your mannequin and making it more and more lifelike as things progress for you. Now, you're probably also thinking, what's the purpose of doing a mannequin as fast as you can like I'm currently doing? I mean, granted, this is 2 times speed, just for those of you who are watching. But what's the point, or what's the purpose in doing your mannequin within your gesture drawings? Well, there is a huge risk that comes with creating a mannequin, right? And the risk is that you are going to start stiffening up your poses because mannequins themselves are really, really stiff. Now, what I would suggest is doing what I'm doing, and that's because it's going to allow you to use what would normally be a pretty stiff thing in the mannequin, and you're using it in a very dynamic way, which is you're using it to draw gestures. Now, the secret to a good gesture drawing session is you want to give yourself enough time to draw everything, but not enough time to perfect all of it, right? And the reason why I say that is because if you get too comfortable with the time that you have and you're taking too much time, then you're going to have very, very stiff looking poses, and using a mannequin and having too much time and having a really stiff pose is just a recipe for disaster. Instead, do what I'm doing. Allow yourself, for me right now, that time frame is 1.5 minutes. That's pretty much my sweet spot. I'd like to get that down to maybe 1:15 or just a minute. But for me right now, that's just teetering on the edge of me feeling like I have enough time and I don't have enough time, and I'm like kind of working in this phase of almost rushing versus kind of having enough time for me to actually get all the pieces in there. So you need to work to figure out what that looks like for you, because you shouldn't be taking 10-15 minutes on each pose, because at that point you're going to have a very stiff drawing and the mannequin's actually not going to help you. So that's kind of all of that stuff as far as how to kind of create a mannequin. Well, actually, I can go over how to create your own personal mannequin, but that's kind of what it will take in order for you to get to the point in which you can start to do imaginative drawing. So that's the other piece of the gestures that's really important too, is pick like a select number of gestures. Right now I'm at about 90. I'm gonna up that number relatively soon, but I was just working with around, I think I had like 40 gestures for months, and the reason why I did that is because I wanted to see the same kinds of poses again and again so that I could almost memorize them. And what you want to do is, as you start to memorize these poses and as you start to get these gestures down, later on you're going to want to start to look at the screen or look at your reference less and less, and that's how you start to get imaginative drawing done. You quiz yourself almost, and what you would do is you would look at the photo and then you would maybe minimize it or something like that, and then you would go ahead and try to draw it from your memory as best as you can, and you're going to keep doing that until you get it almost perfect, right? And after you're done, it's not just you just move on. You look and you check, how close was I to the reference that I had? And eventually what happens is you have the image in your head of what that particular photo is or what that reference was, and then you can draw it straight from your imagination, and then maybe after, without even looking of course, and then after you go and find that photo, you pull it up and you look and you say, okay, these are the things that I'm imagining that are wrong, right? And you correct those things, and you keep doing that and doing that. There's always going to be something that you have to correct, right? There's never a time in which you're just good to go, and that's okay. That means you're still learning, right? But there will be a time in which you can almost get all of it down, basically in a way that is going to really read as that pose and as that thing that you really want. And that doesn't happen without having consistent poses that you're going to be working with time and time again. So that's my suggestion for that. Now, the next thing is how do you come up with your own mannequin? Because just because I have this particular mannequin that I've shown you today, that doesn't mean that you have to do this specific one. Now, what I would recommend for this is I would actually recommend that you look at other people's mannequins, number one, and see what things resonate with you. Some people like to use rectangular prisms or cubes for the chest, and the same thing for the pelvic region. I actually started that way before I started to get to where I'm at now with these more, I would call them anatomically correct shapes, with the egg and kind of that like underwear almost shape for the pelvic region. So that's one recommendation. So looking at other people's stuff. And then the other recommendation actually is to just keep doing gestures and use really good reference. If you're using somebody's drawings, for instance, only use drawings from people that are professionals. Don't use drawings from people that you just like on Instagram. And the reason for that is because some people on Instagram have really beautiful art, but it's actually anatomically incorrect. And also some people, they stretch and push their proportions in a way that's aesthetically pleasing, but without you understanding that, if you're trying to get hired, for instance, and you're doing that and you don't understand that you're pushing and pulling these proportions, once you're being asked to do something that's in a slightly different style, you're going to be kind of lost because you're going to have this habit of doing something that other people do. So for instance, I really like using Mark Brunet's stuff, just because I know that he is using proper proportion, and when he's exaggerating it, it's pretty easy to tell, but he's really good. There's a guy named Brent Eviston. He's on Udemy, and he has some really great references in some of his drawing courses that I would recommend. I wouldn't recommend actually really looking too much at mine yet. I'm getting there, but I definitely have a lot of stuff that I need to continue to work on before I get to that point where I would be comfortable saying like use my drawings as a reference. But the other thing that you can do also is just draw from life as well. You can find there's a whole bunch of different free sites that have a whole bunch of references from models that are really well lit that you can use for your references in your gesture drawings as well. Now, the last point that I want to make about gesture drawing with the mannequin that's I think really important in order to get towards like imaginative drawing is you want to get as many done as you possibly can. And the reason for that is because your stuff, your gestures with these mannequins, especially at first, they're not going to be perfect, and that's okay, right? But you don't want to get stuck doing 1 or 2 a day and it's wearing you out because you're concentrating on it so hard, because then you're not taking in as much information as you possibly could. And instead, if you do, like for instance, I'm up to doing like 15-20 a day, and that's only in a 20-minute sitting, right? And then I take a few of those and I like to make them a little bit more complete. That's something that I would highly recommend you do, and you want to up that number. Like I'm going to do 15 for my live streams and stuff like that for the next few weeks, and then I'm probably going to move up to doing closer to 20. Alright everyone, I hope that video was helpful for you. I worked pretty hard on it. It's something that I've been thinking about doing for quite some time. But yeah, just to kind of solidify, the steps are that you want to kind of create a mannequin based off of reference, and then you want to go into using that mannequin in gesture drawing. And the reason for that is because you want to be able to get your gestures or your mannequins drawn in a short amount of time and pretty, explosive and exciting looking poses, because mannequins can be really stiff. Alright, and then after that, you kind of gradually pull away from the reference and kind of quiz yourself as you draw things from imagination, using, like, you look at the reference and then you draw it and then you go from there. So hopefully all that is helpful for you. Again, like I said in the last video, if you want to, you can find me on Instagram and send me messages of your artwork. I'd love to see it. Alright, I'm Manga Mike, and I'm out.